It's been a long 3 days. We left home probably at least 4 or 5 days for some of us. We came a long way. We've had several sleepless nights or partially sleepless nights. I think this is the time as we examine this meeting and as we examine the rethinking that we actually do this analysis why we're here. If we're talking about rethinking, we really need to go beyond the specifics of our discussion. Rethinking means looking anew. And if we start to do that, I think we have to do it from a perspective. I'm going to do it a bit from my own personal perspective. I came here because I was fascinated by this interaction. My training has been on health and on nutrition. I know much less about agriculture. But without having the full knowledge base, I think we all can reflect on how should this be happening. Clearly, the discussion of the last 3 or 4 days proves that the way it's proceeding is clearly insufficient. And in a way, the invitation is to think again. How would we consider this should be done? How can we make it better? And in attempting to do this, we have to examine, though, the changes in the world we live in. And I think in that sense, the food system, agricultural system, and nutritional issues that we have discussed have been framed in a world that was framed in many ways several decades ago. We're still doing that mode of action. And obviously that mode of action was based, and it still is in our minds, on the Malthusian dogma or the Malthusian issue that we would not be able to produce enough food. I think in this, under the present day, although we do have malnutrition and we do have situations that are extreme, we can say that we produce more food per capita than we ever did before. And that has continued to rise. So that's an important point in this background. At the same time, food is not only food, it's not only a commodity. Food is responding to a basic human need. So if we treat it with the laws of the economics of basic commodities, we're going to get it wrong. We have to think that we're meeting a basic human need, as if we were meeting a basic human need in regulating access to air or access to water. So in that dimension, we have to separate that here we're talking not about just any other commodity as if we were producing tin, copper, or iron. Here we're producing something for for humanity as such. And I think we have to examine this with also a set of basic principles and how they have been shaped. We're living in a world where we have CNN, where we have on television anything that happens any place around the world. We're all living what happened in Egypt now and what happened a couple of months ago, something else in the rest of the world. With the perspective of Latin America, I can say that hunger has been in the discussion of the politics of the region for the last 20, 30 years. And that probably explains why there's been a social demand that gets Lula elected. Lula was elected with the promise of providing food. Evo Morales took power for the first time, an indigenous person in Bolivia, where 95% of the people are indigenous. Before, all the presidents had been, although born locally, they belonged to the very small elite. So we're seeing a change, and the first thing he says, I'm going to propose malnutrition zero for the people. So we cannot see it outside this context. The policies are shaped by the politics, and the politics can be changed in various ways. We're seeing a progressive rise of democracy at the base. And this is good because the solution to the problems is going to come when people demand access to food as a basic human right. Not that we write it in the UN Charter or that we debate the rights approach. It will be based on a demand for food. And everywhere this has happened, governments have actually either toppled or have had to respond to that. And basically, I think we have to keep this in this dimension as we rethink how we're going to get at this interaction. And in this sense, this is the time that we imagine how can agriculture, nutrition, and food work better. But basically, we need a change in paradigm. More of the same, from all the research I've heard, from all of the ideas I've heard, we're not going to get this solved by doing more of the same. And in this rethinking, it cannot be based on what's doable. It needs to be based on what needs to be done. And it needs to be based on doing whatever it takes to make what's needed doable. And that's very different from saying, let's do what can be done. We will not find solutions in this interaction unless we challenge ourselves and the system in saying what needs to be done, and then rethink, and then redefine, and then establish that basic new paradigm. And I think until we change the type of thinking or type of rethinking, we're not going to be able to reimagine. In fact, I looked at the dictionary, and there's no reimagination. You either imagine or rethink. But reimagination is something we wish we could. So I would like to bring us down to earth. And when we do this rethinking, I would like to see that we examine the failures of the system, where the things are failing, and ask ourselves, what if? And I'd like to propose a few what ifs. What if we stop, let's say, we've obviously discussed the malthus, and we all know that we're putting a lot of the food into animals. That's not intrinsically wrong. What's intrinsically wrong is that out of the food supply and the flesh foods that we produce, which is on average, putting it all together, about 120 grams per person in this universe, most, 80% are getting 20 grams, and very few others are getting 150 and some up to 200 grams. And basically, if we're going to take it from a standpoint of a human need, flesh foods are most needed by young children. The rest can do very well, as India and lots of Asia have proven, can be doing very well with minimal amounts of animal foods. And obviously, we can feed many more people if we depend on plant diets. I didn't say this. This was Einstein, among his many statements, proposed that we should make a big shift in our diets and propose that we should go in plant-based diets. Doesn't mean that we're going to use this as a religious dogma, but in fact, it's a very important tenet, and unless we start doing some of that, we're obviously going to run into problems. And if we look at countries that are doing not this, but are putting the price of meat according to the real price and not based on subsidized cereals that are fed to animals, in fact, those countries have the case of Japan, has the longest life expectancy, it has a very clean environment, it has the lowest obesity rates, and in fact, it doesn't need to be tested again. People can live with much less animal foods. What if...
Ricardo, we need to wrap up.
Okay, I'll give you a few other what if.
I'll give you a chance to come back and make more comments.
I'll give you maybe a couple more, and then I'll come back.
Oh, no, I'll give you a chance for more comments.
Okay. What if we start to redefine hunger and malnutrition and base it not only on available energy, as we map the world as a hunger map, but include nutritional quality and lifelong health into food security? What if we measure the growth of children not based on weight, but based on length, which is the index of productivity and lifelong health? Those are very simple things that require rethinking in many other ways. I'll have a few others.
I'll give you a chance to come back.